Peace, party people. I apologize for being late. I have a book club that meets at 4 o'clock. I thought I'd be done by now. We were doing Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. I apologize. Oh my God. There's no excuse. I shouldn't even be that way. I should, if I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna be here. Let me fix this ring light. I'm mega late. Apologize for that. So here we go. That's actually better. Definitely thank y'all for coming through. Somebody mentioned that they had to follow me to the ends of the earth. I apologize for that. I was trying to be hip because I have been on some Twitch joints and I was feeling it. So I decided to try the Twitch route. But I just had a lot of problems with them and their support wasn't responding back to me on time. So I was like, hey, just use YouTube live. If I bring a guest, I got to figure something else out. But this is the platform that I'm looking for because the phone aspect ratio, I'm not a big fan of it. And I want people to be able to watch it. Like, for example, I've watched YouTube Live on my live screen TV, and I thought that was pretty dope. But you could also watch it on a laptop and a tablet as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the phone. And I know that everybody has a smartphone. I get it. But, I just wanted it to be accessible to more people. And maybe I need to rethink it. I don't know. But we're here. Again, I apologize. I know I apologize like 1,000 times. Now, this week's discussion, hip hop music and our obsession with death. This actually is an idea that came from the homie Badisa Banjoko on the Bishop Chronicles, which is a podcast you can find on all platforms. And he had Dr. Ian Levy from New York, and they talked about DMX and Black Rob, and they talked about hip hop music, and in it. I think Banjoko says that we're obsessed with death, and I agree with him 100%. So in here, I'm going to talk about DMX, a prodigy of Mobb Deep, because he's someone that I listened to way more than I did DMX. I wasn't like a huge DMX fan. I know the hits and stuff like that, and I did follow his career. But Prodigy is something that I listened to. I was a fan of his, and I kind of like why he was very transparent with the issues that he had with his health. But also, Prodigy is someone who suffers from PTSD, and he never addressed the mental health aspects of what he was going through. Whereas DMX was someone that was very transparent when it comes to his mental health. He was very open about his issues with depression, his issues with alcoholism and drug addiction. Right? He was very open. He talked about how he was introduced to drugs very early by an older relative. So I kind of want to address that and real quick, the reason why DMX's passing resonated with a lot of us is because we all know a DMX. We all know someone. We all know a Black Rob. We all know a Prodigy, right? We all know brothers and sisters who are going through this and they self-medicate, right? A lot of us self-medicate. A lot of us don't deal with our mental health. It doesn't come out of a vacuum. We just didn't have access to healthcare, right? From slavery, a lot of white people taught everyone that Black people can endure pain longer than any other human being on the planet, right? So physically, they said that we could suffer physical trauma better, mental trauma better, and emotional trauma better. I'm using better as a lack of a term. We're more resilient. That's what we were taught, and that continues in the medical and industrial complex today, right? And a lot of that stuff we internalized. So it's not our fault that we are like this when it comes to mental health. But I think with DMX, he's someone that was very transparent, and a lot of people could relate to that because we either knew someone like him or we suffered through that, right? We know that DMX was abused as a child. He was neglected, which is also abuse, right? Because of that, he felt very alone, right? Even despite the Rough Riders, despite the family, the children that he had, he felt very alone. So that's why a lot of, what he said resonated with people, the things that he talked about. But I do want to talk about how we're obsessed with death, right? And our artists are like that too. And our artists are a reflection of our community, right? And I know that I remember when I was young, even though I wasn't into the street life, right? And I became, radicalized, and I got knowledge of self. I had the death wish. I had this idea that I was going to go down in a hail of bullets. Even though I wanted to be a family man and I wanted to have children and I want to have a partner, lifelong partner. I felt that I had a small window of opportunity, and that I would go down in the hail of bullets, right? Yeah, I actually believe that. I actually sincerely believe that. So to me, to be 48 to me has always been a blessing because I didn't expect to be at this age, right? And for me personally, the passing of DMX, the passing of Black Rob, the passing of Prodigy, the passing of Craig Mack, the passing of Shabba-Doo was big on me as well because Shabba-Doo was one of my heroes. For those that don't know, Shabba-Doo was in the Breaking 1 and 2 movies, Breaking 1 and Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo. And he was someone that I admire. I knew him not as much as I would have liked to, but we interacted. And he's a hero. But he's someone, DMX, he was like what, 50, 51, 52. Black Rob was 52. Prodigy, we were kind of like the same age. He passed a couple of years ago. So these are technically like my peers, right? We come from the same era. We come from the same communities in New York City. So their passing really hits home, right? And let me say this, they represent people that I know and people that I know day to day, and they have these health issues and they deal with mental health and they're trying to figure out how to heal. And a lot of them are passing away very young. And I think the pandemic has exacerbated that, right? The pandemic is really like showing me that. Like it's really like, because this is like a double whammy. And I'm going to talk about the triple whammy in a second. That being said, I think in the last discussion we talked about trauma, right? And what I call it shared trauma, and how that shared trauma affects us and how we carry that on in all the areas that we move through in life and in our communities and our homes. But also PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. And some will say post-traumatic slavery disorder, right? And yes, we carry that, right? And a lot of us have not dealt with that, right? I remember I was having a discussion with my sons, and we were talking about how champion sweaters like have made a comeback. In the last couple of years, they haven't made a comeback. They've been out for last, but more and more people are wearing champion gear. And I remember how I found that when I was young, I had to stop wearing it because certain champion colors, they denoted what kind of drugs you sold in my community. So if I went to certain neighborhoods and wore a particular color, it meant that I sold a particular kind of drug. So I actually had to either find colors that didn't represent that, like orange was one, right? But they were difficult to find in that color, right? So I just stopped wearing it altogether. And then like that kind of stuck with me as I traveled around the country and around the world. I was like, I'm not going to buy that. Even though I wasn't living in that community anymore, it was something that stayed with me. And that's part of my PTSD. But anyway, I wanted to quote DMX in that song, Rough Rider, that Rough Rider anthem song, because Dr. Ian, Dr. Ian Levy talked about how in the Rough Riders anthem, the lyrics are very dark. And in DMX, a lot of his stuff is dark. Like if you listen to like even Party Up in Here, like even that song is very dark. But there's a part that he says here that kind of like our obsession with that, right? He said, home of the brave, my home is my cage. And yo, I'm a slave until my home is a grave. And I repeat that again. He says, home of the brave, my home is my cage. Hey, yo, I'm a slave until my home is a grave. That like resonated like that. Like, and it's funny because it wasn't until Dr. Ian Levy pointed that out that I went back to the lyrics, right? Because I always go to the, drop, shut them up, down. Like that's my part. Like I know that part very well. And a lot of times when I heard the song, I would just let DMX rock to that. And I never like really paid attention to the lyrics. Again, he wasn't somebody whose lyrics I paid attention to, whereas Prodigy I did. But I started looking at his other songs and I was like, wow, like, and it reminds me of a discussion that I had with some of my mentees, because some of my mentees, they were fans of XXXTentacion, and I wasn't a fan of his. I thought he was trash, but I also thought he was a trash person as well. And then some of them would share some of his lyrics with me, and he talked about depression. He talked about, different mental health issues that he was going through. And a lot of my students, like they were familiar with that, and he resonated with them because of those things. And I thought that was something that I needed to talk about. And I know that they were hurt when I was like, oh, he's trash. You know what I'm saying? So like, but because of that discussion with about XXXTentacion, Tentacion, right? Am I saying that right? That my mentees are going to kill me when they hear this. But that opened up that discussion. And with DMX, we need to start having these discussions. With his passing, We need to use this as a vehicle to have that discussion. So earlier I talked about the triple whammy, right? And in my community, the triple whammy was the first one is gun violence, right? Between ourselves, right? So, I had a lot of homies who passed away from gun violence, right? They were victims of it, perpetrators of it as well, right? I've been shot at, right? I've been caught up in that, because of who I was with and where I was, wrong place at the wrong time, even mistaken identity. And then kind of like the second one is state violence, right? So for a lot of us, we see it as either police brutality and repression or the prison industrial complex, right? And then the last whammy would be the health disparities, right? We don't have access to the healthcare that we need, right? We don't have healthcare, right? We're given lackluster care because we were told, right? Doctors are trained to think that, to believe that Black people feel less pain and are more resilient physically when it comes to certain ailments, right? So we have the triple whammy: gun violence, state violence, and health disparities. So DMX is someone who kind of went through that, right? He understood what he was going through, but he didn't have access to that healthcare. And the people around him kind of like enabled him, right? And I'm gonna try not to get into that discussion of the people around him, because I feel like we all know a DMX, right? We all know a Prodigy. We all know a Black Rob. We all know a XXXTentacion, right? We all know these people. They're in our families. They're in our communities. They're in our schools, right? They're at our workplaces. So it's real easy to point fingers at people about what you could have done for DMX and what you could have done for Old Dirty Bastard, when those people are in our lives and we're not doing for them what we're asking other people to do. So that being said, we kind of have to hold ourselves accountable for that, even me, right? And I remember a homie of mine, I kind of like, I saw the signs, right? Because I work with young people and a lot of them have mental health issues, right? So I've kind of like learned how to like pick up, the symptoms. And you have DSM, of course, right? DSM-4, but you learn to pick up the symptoms and you start to bring that home with you. You start to pay attention to certain things and you're like, wait a second, you might suffer from it. Sometimes you might even self-diagnose yourself and you have to ask yourself, do I suffer from these things as well? Because trauma is real, right? And we all deal with trauma differently, right? So like me and my homies, we all experience the same thing. Or I'm not even going to say not just my homies, but people that are my students, right? People that I know, that I came up with, people that I went to school with, people that I was in the military with. We all went through kind of like the same trauma from our respective communities. And then later on, right, when we watch people being murdered on TV, when we see, George Floyd being killed by the police, that is like a shared trauma. And we all deal with it differently, right? Depending on the resources that we have access to, the social networks that we are in, and then the things that we do to kind of like alleviate, that stress and that trauma, right? Some of us have outlets and some of us don't. Some of us self-medicate, right? And some of us seek self-destructive measures to kind of like alleviate those things, right? And we got to kind of like figure out. So the first thing we need to do is figure out where we're at, right? Because I know that if I'm not good, I definitely can't help nobody, right? And like there was a time when, I'm 48, right? There was a time when we taught one another that showing that kind of weakness, I hate to say that, dealing with that, doing the work, what I've learned doing the work, I was taught was admitting that you're weak, right? So realizing that you may suffer from depression, you may have mental health issues, like accepting that was seen as a sort of weakness, right? Because we're supposed to be strong, right? We're supposed to like carry the weight of the world. We're supposed to be like Atlas, right? And if we're not doing that, then we're weak. And we need to really combat that first. We really do. Like, because you would think that in 2021, you wouldn't have that stigma, right? And don't get me wrong, we are moving away from that. We are moving away from the idea that that's a form of weakness. But at the same time, we're not dealing, right? So, yeah, we're mourning the passing of DMX, and we're still in mourning, right? We're still in mourning. A lot of us are still reeling from that, right? Or Black Rob, or Prodigy or whatever. Look what happened to Chris Lighty, right? Like we still don't know what's going on with that, right? And I'm using them as examples because I'm pretty sure that all of us know people like that in our lives, right? But we're not dealing with it. We're not. I'm I'm still dealing with it, but I'm not really, you know what I'm saying? Like we as individuals, like me, you, him, her, like they, like we have to deal with it. Of course, again, we're moving away from the idea that it's weakness to deal with our mental health issues, right? But we really need to deal with it. We need to do the emotional labor. Like I can't emphasize that enough. And I'm glad that we're moving away from the idea that it's weak, but we're still not dealing. And I know a lot of it is it's real easy for me to say we're not dealing with it, but most of us, right? I'm going to say easily, just throw out a number, 98% of us don't know how to deal with it. We don't, right? We don't. Like, let's be honest, right? Number one, we don't have access to healthcare, right? I know right now if I take my job provides me 5 sessions with a mental health professional. That's it for 1 year. They provide me that 5 sessions, right? After that, I got to pay out of pocket. I can't afford that. You know what I mean? So I'm like, should I start? You see what I'm saying? I'm thankful that I have a social network where I could talk to. I could talk to my partner. I could talk to my family. I could talk to my elders. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying we should put it all on one person. I know, like I've learned. I'm thankful that I had a social network throughout my life, so I'm able to kind of like spread it out, like not put it all on one person, because no one person should deal with it. Like my partner is not my therapist. You know what I'm saying? But I can't talk to my partner about certain things, right? And they can support me and help me through it. But I know that having that social network, because what I see with a lot of my students is that they don't have that social network to help them cope, right? But some of us do, right? And I think that's where we need to start. That being said, there might be resources in your area that'll help you begin with that. But there are also books about it, right? There's also books that help you deal with the trauma. So I know for me, what's been super therapeutic has been writing. Writing really, I'm going to go ahead and say that writing helped me avoid self-medication because I was able to kind of like really go through my thoughts and my emotions and how I felt and how I dealt with it. I remember when I used to write poetry and I wrote about my experiences growing up in the hood. I really did. I really talked about that. I really talked about my transition into consciousness, to Black consciousness. And I think that's crucial. You know what I'm saying? Another outlet was reading, like reading, like helped teleport me into different worlds, even as a kid, reading comic books and stuff. And I know people look at it as like, oh, that's entertainment. But for me, I really felt like I was traveling to different places. In my book, I talk about the cipher. I talk about how breakdancing was a place where I really felt safe. Like that's a place where the cipher is really where I felt like I could be my true self and didn't find judgment. And I know like a lot of my students talk about that, right? Like they talk about writing raps is very therapeutic. And that's why Dr. Ian Levy was really like spoke to me, because he does school counseling in hip hop. And I think that's important because for a lot of our young people, hip hop is the speech of the masses. You know what I'm saying? So we all kind of got to find these outlets, and then capoeira as well kind of helped me even further because capoeira helped me put culture, you know what I mean, and history into all of that, right? And it really helped me like understand where my ancestors are in my life, like the places they serve in my life, and how history plays a part in who I am today and my community, right? So I am thankful that I have those outlets that allow me to really learn about myself in a healthy manner that's sustainable and that also helps my community. So it's like a double win, right? So I get a chance to teach young people and mentor them and display good habits that they pick up, and it helps me cultivate humans, right? Because that's what you do as a martial arts instructor. You're supposed to cultivate humans. Not all martial arts instructors do that, but that's what I see as my duty as a martial arts instructor, right? So being an educator, like those are things where I've learned I have to give. That's how I give back, because it was educators that helped me who I am today. And just like again, I know that these are things that I do for myself, but also things that I do in service to my community, and that has really helped me deal with my trauma. That has really helped with my mental health. That has really helped me find outlets and things of that nature, so that I can be all right. I can be better, right? To where therapy is not something that I actually need as an emergency. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that I shouldn't get it. I should. Therapy is good for everybody. Um, and I know that when people ask me, they'll say, "Hey, that's why I have this outlet, right, where I can share the strategies that I use to do that." and the strategies that I use to help other people. So the first thing I do with like my mentees or my students, and they come to me with these issues, the first thing I ask them to do is journal. You know what I mean? And I can't emphasize that enough. Like I can't not emphasize that enough. But yeah, we're obsessed with death. Like, you know, and I remember like Biggie Smalls, right? He has his first album was called Ready to Die, right? Which is, you know, which is not anything new, right? Because Huey Newton of the Black Panther Party, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party, the name of his book was called, his first book was called Revolutionary Suicide, right? George Jackson's book was called Blood in My Eye, right? And you know, later on in his second book, in Huey Newton's second book, To Die for the People, he talked about how he expected the Black Panther Party to be eradicated by the FBI, by U.S. military forces, local police departments. He knew that, so he kind of like had that death wish, and he's a hood cat, right? He would be, you know, the same fervor that he had. Military fervor was the same thing I see in DMX, right? But he had this death wish, right? And then you see that happen again with Biggie with his album Ready to Die. And if you look at it, right, what is it? What's in the album cover, right? There's a black child, a beautiful black child, right? And the background is white. You know what I mean? The background is white. This is Ready to Die. In this white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, he's ready to die. You know, and at the end of that album, right? The end of that album, he commits suicide, right? And he talks about it, that one song, right? He commits suicide. He talks about going to heaven or hell, right? And again, Biggie Smalls wasn't the most political motherfucker, right? Oh, I'm not supposed to cuss, excuse me. He wasn't the most political artist, right? But you cannot tell me that is a social political statement, right? And that's considered a classic album, right? Ready to Die is considered a classic album, right? Think about that for a second, right? And then DMX comes along, right? And he has an album called It's Dark and Hell is Hot, right? You have that, almost like that death wish. Like he knows that he's going to die. He knows he's going to hell. Like he knows that he's damned, right? And you know, and when you listen to his lyrics, you're like, they're very dark. Like, but a lot of hip hop, we're obsessed with death, right? We are, right? You know, when you look at a lot of artists talking about, you know, murders, guns, you know, drugs, self-medication, you know, like we see that happen a lot. And those are the ones that resonate with people. Those are the songs that people are like, yo, I'm feeling this, right? Like that's the shit that people remember, excuse my language, right? Like that's the stuff, I'm doing this fast though, right? That's the stuff that we think is dope and we consider classic hip hop music, right? Straight out of Compton, right? And I know I'm an old school cat. I'm talking about old songs, but my point is that these things are not new. This obsession with death is not new. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it is definitely something that comes from white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. It's something that stems from slavery, right? This idea that we have a short lifespan, right? And black men do have a shorter lifespan, right? Than their white counterparts. That's fact, right? And again, it's, you know, the double whammy. Like, you know, when we were young, we worried about gun violence. My students, they're young, the ages of 16 to 24, and they worry about gun violence, right? And then as they get older, we start worrying about our health disparities. If we're not killed by the state, right? If we're not killed by the state, then the health disparities are what's going to get us. So yeah, it's wild. So what I tell people, man, because when I was young, I really thought that I was going to go out and hell the bullets, right? But what I've learned is that, and I'm not saying this is endemic to everybody. What I'm saying is that for me, I learned that it wasn't that I was afraid to die, right? I learned that I was afraid to live, right? I was afraid to live. So I remember one of my elders telling me, when I used to tell one of my elders, yo, I love you to death, he'd be like, man, don't say that. Say I love you to life, brother. Like, I love you to life. I want you to live. I want you to be a grandfather. I want you to have grandchildren and hopefully see your great grandkids. And I'm like, yo, that's what we need to do, right? None of us should be martyrs, right? All of us should live to see our grandkids graduate from college, if that's what we want, right? Right? That's what we're shooting for, right? So, yeah, we need to be ready to live, and we need to figure out what that is and how that looks like, right? So, yes, here, you ready for it? Like, you know, how to eat to live. We need to eat better, right? We need to, Shout out to the Gem City Market here in my city, right? Where the community got together, put their money together, and the community is the co-owner of this cooperative where we're going to bring healthy food to an area that's food apartheid, right? Like that's how we're going to do that, right? DMX had Rough Riders, and I remember the Rough Riders had a DVD on how to work out in the hood, right? Like these are the things that are going to sustain us. These are the things that we're going to do. We need to be better fathers, right? We need to be better sons and better brothers, right? We need to look out for each other, right? Let's do those kind of things, right? Let's, let's celebrate the lives of these individuals, right? And what they did to us. And then like really, we'll be doing DMX a disservice if we don't continue his legacy of learning how to cope with these things, right? Like he was very open. So let's be open. Let's talk about that. Let's really, our emotional and mental health is important, and health is wealth, right? These are the things that we need to be shooting for. We need to be ready to live. I'm gonna start taking questions. Shout out to the homie Gambi. He asked, "Is this unique to the Black experience in America?" No, it's not. Because I could talk about Palestinians, right? We could talk about folks right now. What's happening in Brazil, right? We just had a situation in Brazil, and the pandemic is really affecting the communities down there, right? What's happening in Colombia now, right? So they're having the same experiences too, where a lot of young people are obsessed with death, right? And the music they listen to, right? Like DMX wasn't just a star in the United States; he was a star overseas as well. You know what I mean? Tupac was someone who people are fans of overseas, just like over here, right? So I think, again, DMX, hip hop music speaks to a lot of people on the margins, right? Marginalized people. It does. It affects them, and it resonates with them because of those shared experiences, that shared trauma, right? And white supremacist capitalist patriarchy is not just in the United States; it's all over. Does anybody else have a question or anything like that? And I'm going to keep it going. I'm going to keep it going. So again, I'm going to go over some of the solutions, writing, right? But also, like, I know I'm thankful that I started the emotional health group. We've kind of on a hiatus, but we're going to start again when the Gem City Market opens back up. An emotional men's health group where a bunch of men get together. We have circle, and we talk about different topics each week. So if I am willing. If you want to create something like that in your community, in your church, in your school, in your community center, let me know, and I will send you a 6-week outline of how that looks like. Doesn't mean it has to look like how I have in that outline, but it kind of gives you a blueprint. I will send that to you. I don't have a problem with that because the original plan for me was, pre-COVID was by the end of 2020, I wanted to have 5 of those going on in my city. That was the original goal. And then at the end of 2021, I wanted to have at least 5 more going on throughout the state of Ohio. So, the more the merrier. So if I've had 2, if we have 2 in New York and 3 in Florida and 2 in Virginia and 5 in Texas and 8 in California, then that's what I'm talking about. So I'll do that. My group is called Fresh to Death. Shout out to my homie 13th of Nazareth who gave me that idea, the name. So that's just another way you can do that, because I know that talking about it is therapeutic. And when you have your A-likes in the same room, and I'm telling you, we've had these discussions and it's kind of like, boom, I'm going through that right now. Or boom, I just went through that. Or my man's going through that right now. Or, and it's kind of like, you'll see like brothers really want to heal. And healing, let me say this about healing. The thing about healing is that we look at healing as something that happens when there's an emergency, right? So we look at it as, and I'm not saying it's not true, right? If I fall down the steps and I break my arm, I got to go to the hospital and I got to do some healing, whatever that entails. But healing is something that's consistent, that we should be consistently doing, because part of that is preventative medicine as well, right? But also there are things that happen that we should work on ourselves to prepare us for trauma, because trauma is going to happen. We can't avoid that, right? We can't avoid that, right? So like, we need to be prepared mentally, emotionally, physically. We need to have plans in order, right? We need to know who to talk to, who we can talk to. So you should have brothers on speed dial that you can talk to like that, ancestors as well, right? So that's just another. So journaling, speaking, talking to one another, and yes, finding an outlet. Number 3, finding an outlet. I know, like, a lot of times people get mad at me because I was like, oh, you need to find a hobby. And they're like, oh, no, no, what are you saying? And it's like, it's not that. It's just that you need to find something to do for yourself, for you. You know what I mean? Gardening. A lot of people find gardening super therapeutic, right? Growing plants, that for a lot of people, that's therapeutic, and we all have to find out what that is. And I can't tell you what that is for you. For me, is breakdancing and capoeira. That's what it is for me. Okay, if you are trying to be supportive, how do you set boundaries? Okay, cool. Um, Let me just say this. It is not easy to set boundaries. It's easier said than done. So if you're having difficulties doing that, I get it, right? Now, I will say this, and I have to practice this. I have to practice this because I'm very guilty of this. If I really love you, I should pay attention, right? That's number one. I should pay attention because what happens is if I don't pay attention, I'm not going to pick up your body language because body language is 60% of what you say. I mean, body language makes up 60% of speech. 60% of what we communicate is body language, right? So sometimes you could tell when somebody gets hit by their body language. They only have to say nothing. And if you notice that with your partner, and I can speak for myself, I know you, I'm sure, God, but you can speak for yourself as well. I'm speaking for you as well, that with your partner, you've been around that person for so long that you can pick up certain things, right? Right? You could be in a room and you could pick up certain things. So because you love that person and you care about them and you pick that up. So that's one way you can set boundaries, right? But that takes a lot of work and a long time to do that. Some people don't even do that, but that, talking, right? And I've told certain people, I said to them, hey man, like they come with me with something heavy and I'll stop them. I'll say, hey, look, today is not that day. Like I'm going through it, and I really, because I'm an empath, right? I really can't really take that right now. You know what I'm saying? And I think if you're clear, and not just at that moment, if you're somebody who's very clear about things, right? Like my coworkers know that at 11:30 and 12:30, don't talk to me. I'm at lunch. You know what I mean? They also know that after 4:30, I clocked out. Do not call me about work. Even my manager knows that. Like I'm very clear about that. I'll be like, don't. And they know. And there's times they've called me and I ain't pick up. And they forgot about it. They're like, oh snap. I have a homie who lives in California, and she'll tell me, because I do a lot of morning texts to a lot of my peoples to check up on them, right? And there are times when I'm in the process of that habit, I've texted her, and it's 8 here, but it's 5 o'clock in the morning over there, and it wakes her up. Like, so she's like, hey, don't do that no more. Can you wait till lunchtime to do that? Like, my bad, right? My own daughter, because I text people every day. She's like, Dad, can you not text me every day? I'm like, oh, okay. When can I text you? She's like, okay, text me on these days or once every 3 days. And I think that when you're more communicative and you're more vocal and you're more open to listen to criticism, that's how you set those boundaries. And those boundaries need to be set early and consistently, right? Consistently. So I have another homie who says, yo, on Saturdays, that's for my kids. That's when I work with my kids. So don't call me, don't ask me for nothing. I'm like, okay, cool. So and I know I sound very basic when I say that, but again, when you set those boundaries early and consistently, it's easy to do the heavier stuff, right? It's very easy. And I think that's why a lot of my homies appreciate me, because I'm like real clear about my boundaries. Don't do this. Don't do this. Text me before you want. I don't FaceTime with you. I only FaceTime with my moms and my siblings. You see what I'm saying? Like I set those things early, and they're very basic. So when the heavy things come around, people kind of expect that from you. You know what I mean? And they'll expect that from you. Oh, you're somebody that's very, because you know what? The word I'm looking for is clarity. You got to be consistently clear about certain things. And once you develop that habit and that's what you're known for, nobody will mince any of your words. Guarantee it. And I know it gets on people's nerves sometimes when I'm like, hey, real quick, this time is when you need to hit me up. They be like, oh, you already said that. I'm like, yeah, I just want to be clear. I don't want nobody to walk away from this conversation thinking that I don't want nobody assuming I said something. I don't want them to misinterpret what I said. So clarity is important. And if you start clarity early with the small things, right? Like when you come to my capoeira class, right? I was like, don't wear shorts. That's the only rule I have, and be on time, right? I'm very clear about that. Can I bring my 5-year-old cousin? You can bring him, man. You just don't wear. No, he better not be wearing shorts, and be on time. Those are the two things. Be very clear. Once you're clear about things, that'll be your reputation. Everybody knows I'm clear. I'm not trying. I try not to be confusing or vague about anything. You know what I mean? So, and a lot of times that's what we miss in that discussion, that clarity in that communication. I hope that answers your question. I know that was long-winded answer. So, anybody else? And thanks, dope questions, by the way. Really dope questions. Anyone else have any questions for me? Again, I apologize for being late. And also, if you came in late in this discussion, I am going to post this on my YouTube channel. If you go on YouTube and you search Brother Omi, Omi is spelled O-M-I, it'll come up. So if you miss it, that's fine. It's going to be on there. And I will be back here next Saturday again, just to let y'all know. Definitely. But I don't want anybody to think that I missed it. And I apologize because I know I moved around a lot. I went from IG Live to Twitch, and now I'm on YouTube Live. But I'm feeling this YouTube Live thing. I really, really, really am. I guess I'm on the laptop, so there's no issues with, a lot of times on IG Live, depending on where I was, there was always problems with connectivity, and I don't have that issues here with YouTube. So thank you, YouTube. Shout out to y'all on your platform. I know I'm not getting paid. So anybody, anything else for me? Good questions again. Again, when we're talking about DMX, Black Rob, let's really honor their memories by dealing with the issues that we have and helping other people with their issues. I think we'll do them a great honor if we do that. And I think we do them a disservice if we don't deal with those issues. And I know a lot of us are still grieving. And, the pandemic, I can't even emphasize enough that we're still not out of the clear when it comes to the pandemic. And what I mean by that, I mean two things. I mean, number one, people are still catching it and dying here in our communities, right? So yes, please get vaccinated. Yes, Pfizer gang, right? Pfizer gang, right? Please get vaccinated. But number two, people around the world, we were just talking about Brazil. They're having, oh my God, it's wild out there. And let me say this, and people could take offense to this if they want to, but we're very privileged, right? Because here we are. There are places that are actually accepting walk-ins now. Because when I took my vaccine, I had to set up an appointment. But now in this country, you can walk in and get it at your local pharmacy. You can walk into a Rite Aid, a Kroger's, and you can get a vaccine if you get there at a particular time. I know in some places they end at 5:30, but you can literally just walk in and get a vaccine depending on what they're giving out that day. Whereas in other countries, like in Brazil, in South Africa, only the rich have access to the vaccine, right? So, and here we are. There are people that are actually not showing up for their appointments. There are people that are saying, I'm not getting vaccinated. And that's messed up, man. That really is messed up, man. I think that really is, wow. Really, we doing that? That's really messed up. And get vaccinated, man. 100 million people in the United States, 110 million people, in the United States are fully vaccinated. Another 60 million have gotten their first dose. No one is, you know what I'm saying? You would think that from what you hear from the conspiracy theorists, and the anti-vaxxers, you would think that those people can't have kids or they're dying off, and they're not doing that. So come on, man. Let's do the right thing and look out for one another. That's how we do that. That's what we're supposed to do, right? Also, happy early Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, all the aunties, grandmothers, godmommies, teachers who nurture our students, our older siblings who help raise us. You know what I mean? Happy Mother's Day to all of y'all, all of y'all, because all of y'all moms. You know what I mean? So do I have any other questions before I head out? I'm going to give it about 2 more minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and head out. Thank you all for being, number one, patient with me, because, again, somebody said I moved to the ends of the earth. I did. And I went to one platform to another, and I finally got it right. What I should have done looking back was I should have planned this out more strategically, and I didn't do that. And in the future, I'm gonna not do that. I'm gonna say, hey, this is what I'm gonna do the research, and then go from there. So right now, YouTube has just been dope. I did one on Thursday for Man Heal Thyself, the book by Queen Afua and Supernova Islam. And I did that, and that was dope. So and it's up on YouTube already if you want to check it out. So, yep, one more minute, then we're gonna go ahead and end it. But thanks for everybody that showed up. I was hoping that my boy Quadro was here, but I know he's probably busy. With Capoeira or what he's doing in his area of the world. So definitely, peace and love to all of y'all. I appreciate y'all coming here and supporting me. I do have a podcast, When My Killer Tape At, which is on all platforms. Right now, I'm on a hiatus until June. Took 1 month off to start season 7. But if you go, you can find all the old episodes. I have 122, 24 episodes. So go ahead and support that. Check it out. And I'm still doing the fast, level 1 fast for, which you see that I'm messing up because I'm cussing here and there, for the Man Heal Thyself book club. But I'm in my 8th day and I need to journal. I haven't journaled today. I need to do that. So, and I just talked about that. So I'm going to go ahead and end it unless anybody has a question. I appreciate y'all. I am going to be watching the Versus tonight, SWV, and is it Escape? Yeah, SWV and Escape. I'll be watching that, so I'll be in the house. So definitely look out for me there. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Retweet this, repost this, share it on Facebook, wherever y'all at. Instagram, on Twitter, and you can give people my information. They can DM me, and I'll gladly talk to them about it. I have no problems doing that. But again, I appreciate y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and end it. Here we go. A la una, a la dos y a tres.